Welcome to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. This podcast is for NP students studying to pass their NP certification exam. Getting to the correct test answers means breaking down the exam questions themselves. Expert Fitzgerald faculty clinicians share their knowledge and experience to help you dissect the anatomy of a test question so you can better understand how to arrive at the correct test answer. So, if you're ready, let's jump right in.
The psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner is evaluating a 69-year-old patient who has self-referred for evaluation. The patient retired from his professional role as a CEO from a major Fortune 500 company 8 months ago and admits that he feels himself sinking into an uncharacteristic depression. For most of his life, he has been a high achiever, and he retired 8 months ago with the intention of enjoying the wealth he worked so hard to build. While he did take some big trips and had a lot of fun at first, now he feels oddly empty and for no good reason feels himself sinking into depression. According to Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, this patient may be having maladaptive resolution of which stage of development? A, identity versus role confusion. B, initiative versus guilt. C, generativity versus stagnation. Or D, ego integrity versus despair. So remember, Erikson was a famous child psychologist who divided the entire life cycle into a series of 8 conflicts that he asserted we go through the life cycle, and either these conflicts will be successfully resolved and help us develop, strength and healthy positive character traits, or not successfully resolved and lead to maladaptive consequences, mental health symptoms, and not positive personality traits. So this gentleman, which stage of the life cycle do you think he's in? And since he's having depressive symptoms, clearly this would be maladaptation. And D is the correct answer. This is the final stage of the life cycle according to Erikson, ego integrity versus despair. This is the point at which the person is either confident and maintains a sense of integrity or loses it and sinks into a depression. Sometimes people who have been defined all their life by their professional role, or by any role for that matter, in this case a professional one, they have difficulty coping when they are no longer that person. We see this all the time with people whose entire life, adult life I should say, have been defined by their professional role. I see it in my profession. I work with a number of nationally recognized nurse practitioner experts, nurse practitioner speakers, and that is who they are. That defines their whole world. And if you retire and leave that, it can be very difficult to adapt to. So it's not at all unusual. Either, according to Erikson, the person will successfully leave that role, adapt successfully, and find other ways that define them and other things that they are proud of and that they feel achieves them at that last stage of life. People who can't adapt to no longer being that Fortune 500 CEO, they do have trouble when they're just not that person anymore, because then, of course, who are they? So that's the answer to the question. Identity versus role confusion is actually the stage of adolescence in which the patient learns who he or she is. This is when, with identity versus role confusion, the patient has to develop their own individual self and separate from the parent. So that certainly is about that certainly is not about retirement. Initiative versus guilt is the preschool age child who is just learning to be independent. So now they can ambulate, they can explore, they have fine motor skills, they like to get into stuff and look at stuff, and initiative versus guilt. Either they successfully resolve this tendency they now have to take initiative and look at everything, or feel guilty about what they're doing. And then finally, generativity versus stagnation is the stage of middle age. This is when people have to confront the reality of their life versus what they expected it would be. This is the classic stage of the midlife crisis. You have people that reach that 40, 50-year-old age range and suddenly realize that there is a finite end to the life cycle. that they're not going to achieve all the things they dreamed about when they were young, like the future is here. And that's a different level of conflict. But what this patient is struggling with clearly is stepping out of the role that has defined his entire adult life and now having to resolve ego integrity versus despair. And successful resolution of ego integrity versus despair really is that they need to find what defines them in that post-retirement stage.
Thank you for listening to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. And for more NP resources, visit FHEA.com.